Welcome back to The Deep Dive, the show that takes your source material and turns it into essential knowledge. Today, we are setting our clock for a crucial moment in computing history, 1985.
1985.
Yeah.
Yeah, this was the year when true portability started to feel, well, possible, moving beyond those heavy luggables.
Exactly. We're
Yeah.
talking about machines that could actually slip inside a briefcase.
But that freedom, it wasn't cheap. Technology always follows that pattern, doesn't it? If you were an early adopter, a professional needing serious computing power away from the desk,
Like a traveling exec or maybe an engineer out in the field.
or, critically, a journalist on a deadline, if you needed that functional independence, you paid, well, an astronomical price for it back then.
And the cost of that independence is precisely what we're getting into today. We're doing a deep dive on the Talbot Dialtex-4.
The Dialtex-4. Yeah, this was marketed by Talbot Computers, based down in Bournemouth.
And it was aimed squarely at the high-end professional, wasn't it? Someone who needed a lot more grunt than the typical portables people knew.
Definitely more than those popular Kyocera machines. You know, the ones Tandy sold as the Model 100 or Olivetti as the M10. This was a different beast.
So the promise was text processing, communications on the move, better engineering, professional compatibility.
All that good stuff. But the price, wow. The basic machine, just the computer with CP/M and their special software, was $649 in 1985.
And you really need to put that into perspective for today. When you adjust that for inflation, let's say to 2025, that $649 is roughly 2,660 pounds, just for the base unit.
2,600 pounds.
Yeah.
This was absolutely not a casual buy. It was serious capital equipment.
So our mission today is to unpack the detailed bench test review of this machine. It's from Personal Computer World, February 1985.
Right. We need to understand not just what it did, but really how they justified that massive price tag. What was special about the hardware, the software, the build quality?
And the first thing we hit, right off the bat, is this twist the original reviewer, Peter Bright, picked up on immediately.
Yeah.
You said Talbot marketed it.
Yeah, but it wasn't exactly a well-kept secret. Even then, it was more like a technological shortcut. It was a rebadged machine.
Rebadged? From who?
Epson. It was pretty obvious if you looked closely, or especially if you opened it up. The main circuit board, the PCB, clearly stamped Epson.
No kidding.
And the actual maker's label on the back casing also said Epson. Specifically, it identified the machine as an Epson PX-8.
Okay, so hold on. If it's basically an Epson PX-8,
Yeah.
what were Talbot Computers actually doing? Why this separate branding and marketing push?
That's where the value add came in. Talbot wasn't really doing the hardware engineering. They were doing integration and software. Epson gave them this fantastic, robust, pretty fast platform.
Right.
Talbot took that base and bundled it with specialized software. The big one was their communications package called InText, and they also had the secure transfer thing called Dialtex.
Oh.
So they were selling a solution, not just a computer, aimed at specific jobs, specific vertical markets, as they called them. Journalists, maybe sales teams, auditors, people who needed a ready-to-go tool for a specific task.
They were selling the whole package, the assured functionality.
Exactly. Leveraging Epson's quality, but adding that crucial application layer the customer needed.
That makes a lot more sense.
Oh.
Okay, let's dig into the engineering itself then, because for 1985, and for that price, this thing must have been built like a tank. Looking at the physical specs, it really was portable. Designed to fit in a briefcase, you said? How big are we talking?
Measurements were 34 millimeter high, 297 millimeter wide, and 216 millimeters deep. So yeah, pretty compact, slipped right in.
And it wasn't just small, it felt sturdy.
That was a huge selling point. You know how some plastic computers back then felt, well, a bit cheap?
Oh yeah, flimsy.
This wasn't like that. The review mentions extremely high quality, cream-colored plastic. It gave it a really solid, well-made look.
And you mentioned the comparison to Hewlett-Packard earlier. That's serious praise for build quality in the mid-'80s.
It really is. HP gear was known for being tough, precise. Think industrial quality.
So compared to something like the Tandy 100.
Big difference in feel. The Kyocera machines, like the Tandy, often felt more utilitarian, almost calculator-like. The Dialtex-4 looked and felt professional, like it could handle being knocked around a bit during travel.
Which I guess helps justify that price psychologically.
Definitely. I had to feel worth the money. And it had this interesting modular design, too, which was quite advanced for its size.
Modularity, how did that work?
Well, on the right of the screen, there was this bay. It had a kind of complicated catch system.
Okay.
You could pop out a blank module and plug in something else without taking the whole thing apart.
And what could you plug in there? What were the options?
The review mentioned a few things. There was a microcassette recorder module, kind of basic storage,
Right. Take
or a 64K RAM expansion capsule if you needed more memory. And the really interesting one was a planned direct connect modem.
planned. Ah, there's the catch.
A big one, especially in the UK back then. The modem module itself might have been ready, but it needed approval from British Telecom, BT.
Ah, the dreaded BT approval process.
Exactly. BT controlled the phone network, and they were incredibly slow, very conservative about letting third-party stuff, especially modems, connect directly. They were suspicious of them.
So the hardware was there, but bureaucracy was in the way.
Pretty much. The reviewer rightly said, don't hold your breath waiting for that modem module. It just highlights how tricky it was to get modern comms working back then.
That's fascinating context. Okay, let's get inside the machine, metaphorically speaking. The processing power. It had a dual processor design.
Yeah, which was smart. The main brain was a CMOS Z80 chip.
CMOS, okay, so low power consumption, good for batteries.
Crucial for running off AAs.
Right.
But the surprising part was the speed. It ran at what the review called a commendable 3.68 millihertz.
Why was nearly 4 millihertz commendable for a CMOS Z80 then?
Because getting that kind of speed out of a low-power chip designed for batteries was a real balancing act. A lot of other portables were slower because they prioritized battery life above all else.
Right, they could feel sluggish.
Exactly. So this speed, almost 4 millihertz, made the Dialtex-4 feel noticeably quicker when running actual programs like CPM stuff or the text editor. The review explicitly says this accounted for its comparatively speedy operation.
And if you're a professional, time is money. That speed matters.
Directly. Faster operation means less waiting, more productivity. It's a key difference between a professional tool and just a portable gadget.
And the second processor, the slave processor, what did that do?
That was a little CMOS 7508, a 4-bit chip. Its whole job was to handle things like scanning the keyboard, making sure it registered your key presses properly,
Okay.
and, really importantly, managing the power switching.
Why have a whole separate chip just for keyboard and power? Couldn't the main Z80 do that?
You could, but splitting it off has advantages. It frees up the main Z80 to just run your applications. Plus, for power management and that instant-on feature, it's much more efficient.
How so?
The slave chip could sit there using almost no power, just waiting for you to press a key or plug in the power adapter. It kept the main Z80 completely powered down until it was actually needed.
Ah, so that separation was key for battery life and the quick wake-up.
Absolutely. It let the machine power down quickly, but then, because the RAM was battery-backed, it could come back instantly right where you left off. Huge convenience for mobile use.
Let's talk about that memory setup. It relied a lot on ROM and this battery-backed RAM, didn't it?
Yeah, the standard setup was 64K of CMOS RAM with battery backup. That battery backup is key. It meant the machine wasn't really ever off in the traditional sense.
Your data stayed in RAM even when it was switched off.
Exactly. Your documents, whatever you were working on. And part of that 64K could be set aside as a RAM disk.
RAM disk.
Hmm?
For people not familiar with CPM back then, why was that important?
Oh, speed. A RAM disk basically tricks the system into thinking a chunk of its super-fast electronic memory is a physical disk drive.
Okay.
Accessing data from RAM is measured in milliseconds. Accessing it from a floppy disk takes seconds, maybe more. From a cassette tape, forget about it.
Right.
So, putting frequently used programs or the document you're editing onto the RAM disk made the whole machine feel incredibly responsive. It helped make up for how slow external storage like floppies or tapes could be.
And the operating system itself was in ROM. That helped with speed too, I bet.
Definitely. 32K of ROM just for the OS. Plus, it had sockets for 2 more ROM capsules for applications. These could be 8K up to 32K each.
So applications could live permanently in ROM.
Yes.
Yeah.
Which meant they never needed to be loaded from disk or tape. You turn the machine on, your word processor or comms software is just there, instantly available, no waiting. That was a real luxury.
Incredible. And all this running off 4 AAA batteries?
Yeah.
That 3.68 millihertz Z80 must have drawn some power. How did they manage conservation?
Well, beyond the CMOS chips themselves, it was software control. They had this config program.
Config.
Yeah, you could go in there and tell the machine, okay, if I don't press any keys for, say, 5 minutes, power yourself off.
Smart. Saves the batteries if you walk away.
Crucial. And like we said, because of the separate power chip and the battery-backed RAM, when you switched it back on, boom, you were right back where you were, instantly. No reboot. That feature alone was huge for productivity on the go.
They even included a physical switch, didn't they? A backup on-off switch. Why would you ever turn the RAM backup off?
Good question. Probably for long-term storage if you knew you weren't going to use it for months. Or maybe if you were changing the AA batteries, you'd want to switch the backup off briefly to avoid any chance of corrupting the RAM data during the swap. It just gave you that extra bit of control.
Makes sense. Okay, connectivity. The review said something like, everywhere you look, there's a slot, plug, or hatch. Sounds like it was loaded.
It really was, especially the serial ports. Most computers then gave you maybe one serial port running at, 9,600 bits per second if you were lucky?
Yeah, that sounds about right.
The Dialtex-4 had 2 fast RS-232 serial ports.
How fast is fast here?
They used these neat little micro DIN sockets, save space compared to the big chunky connectors, and they could run up to 38,400 BPs. The review specifically calls that unusually fast.
38,000 BPs. Wow. What would you even use that speed for back then? Most modems weren't that fast.
True, standard modems weren't. But it was perfect for talking to faster printers or that external disk drive they offered, or maybe connecting to some kind of high-speed corporate network if you had access. It was future-proofing, really.
So if you're that journalist on deadline, that speed helps get your story filed faster. Less chance of errors on a noisy line.
Absolutely. Faster transfer means less time on the phone line, potentially lower costs, and crucially, less opportunity for data corruption. Speed equaled reliability in that context.
Okay, besides the 2 fast serial ports, what else did they pack in there?
The list is pretty amazing for the size. You had a standard Centronics parallel port for hooking up regular desktop printers.
Okay, standard printer port.
A 50-way system expansion bus connector. God knows what that was for, but it offered potential.
Right, future expansion.
A micro DIN plug for using an external cassette recorder for storage if you couldn't afford the disk drive.
The budget option.
Yep. The power input, obviously. And get this, a dedicated input for a barcode reader.
A barcode reader. Really? That seems very specific.
It totally confirms they were targeting niche professional roles. Think inventory management, maybe retail auditors, field engineers needing to scan part numbers directly into the machine.
So not just journalists, mobile data collection too.
Exactly. Another sign of that vertical market strategy.
And all this I/O supported a whole ecosystem of peripherals, right?
Yeah, and the peripherals were designed with the same portable idea in mind, like the Epson PF-10 disk drive.
The portable 3.5-inch one.
That's the one. Compact unit, 3.5-inch discs. It didn't connect via the parallel port. It used one of those fast serial lines.
Clever.
And crucially, it had its own internal rechargeable batteries. The whole setup could run without plugging anything into the wall.
A self-contained battery-powered computer and floppy drive connected by high-speed serial, all in a briefcase.
Yep.
That's genuinely impressive for 85.
It really completed the mobile office idea. And for printing on the go, they had the Epson P40 micro thermal printer.
Also portable.
Yeah, small enough to carry easily. And it also connected serially, so you could print out drafts or maybe receipts right there in the field. The hardware integration was really well thought out.
Okay, let's shift to actually using the thing. Great engineering is one thing, but the keyboard and screen are where the user lives. Let's start with the screen, often the weak point of early portables. The Dialtex-4 had a 40-character by 8-line LCD.
Yeah, 40 by 8. On paper, that sounds incredibly small, doesn't it? Especially compared to desktop monitors even then.
Definitely restrictive.
But the reviewer absolutely raved about how easy it was to read. They called it one of the most easily readable displays I've come across.
That's high praise indeed for an 85 LCD. What made it so good?
Well, it suggests really good contrast, maybe better reflective technology than others were using, and it had that physical thumb wheel on the side to adjust the contrast.
Ah, so you could tweak it for different lighting. Vital if you're actually using it out and about.
Absolutely. Whether you were in a poorly lit hotel room or trying to see it in brighter conditions, that adjustability was key.
But it wasn't perfect visually, was it? There was that little quirk with the characters.
Right. The reviewer pointed out the specific visual flaw. The characters didn't have true descenders.
Descenders. You mean like the tails on letters like G or J or P?
Exactly. Those parts that normally hang below the main line of text. On this display, they just stopped at the baseline. The reviewer admitted it certainly looks odd.
A minor annoyance, maybe, but shows the limits of the display tech.
It does. Even on a high-end machine, they were still figuring out LCDs. But the software had a really clever way to deal with the small size of the screen.
Ah, yes, the virtual screen. That sounds important.
It was absolutely critical. This is what made it a proper professional tool, not just a fancy note-taker. Most serious software, especially under CPM, expected to run on an 80-column by 25-line screen.
The standard terminal size.
Right. If your physical screen is only 40 by 8, you need some way to show that bigger workspace.
So the little 40 by 8 LCD was like a viewport, a window onto a much bigger virtual area.
Precisely. You could set up this virtual screen in two main ways. Either the standard 80 columns by 25 lines, or a sort of taller, narrower view of 40 columns by 50 lines.
Okay, and that meant you could run standard CP/M programs that expected 80 columns.
Yes. Programs that just wouldn't work properly or would look terrible if forced onto a native 40-column display. This virtual screen made them usable.
How did you actually move that viewport around? How did you see the rest of the virtual screen?
They used the arrow keys combined with modifier keys. If you held Shift and pressed an arrow, the view moved just one character or one line at a time. Fine control.
Okay.
But if you wanted to jump across the document faster, you held Control and pressed an arrow. That moved the view a whole screen full 40 by 8 at a time. Made it quick to pan around that larger 80 by 25 space.
Yeah.
Essential if you were editing anything substantial.
Smart. Okay, moving to the keyboard, they actually offered two different types.
Yeah, which again points to targeting different professionals. The main one, the one in the review unit, was a 72-key typewriter-style keyboard.
Like a normal computer keyboard, just smaller.
Pretty much. But they also offered a heavy-duty membrane keyboard option.
The membrane, like on some calculators or industrial control.
Exactly that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Sealed, flat surface, much more resistant to dirt, dust, maybe liquids, clearly aimed at field work, data capture in rougher environments. That one even had a separate numeric keypad area built in.
Interesting. Let's focus on the typewriter one, though. The reviewer liked the layout, but wasn't wild about the colors.
Huh? Yeah, the colors were bold. The reviewer called the scheme very striking, although overdone. They used color to differentiate key groups because space was tight.
How so?
The main QWERTY keys were dark brown. The return key was bright red, impossible to miss. Cursor keys were orange. Other function keys were light gray. It was visually busy, but you knew where everything was.
It sounds like function over form may be a necessary evil given the size.
Probably. They squeezed in 9 special function keys, 5 of them programmable, which is great for custom software, plus dedicated keys for stop, escape, pause, and help system.
And no dedicated number pad on that typewriter version.
No, but they had a clever workaround. A numeric mode.
How did that work?
You press a key, and a block of letters on the right side of the keyboard, MJKLUIP, suddenly acted like a calculator keypad.
Ah, an overlay. Nice compromise for people doing number entry.
Exactly. The reviewer called it great for calculator buffs, and to avoid confusion about what mode you were in, they had little LED lights, indicators for caps lock, numeric mode, and insert mode. Really helpful on a battery machine where you might not always realize a mode is active.
Very thoughtful. Okay, software time. This was Talbot's big differentiator, starting with the OS CP/M baked into ROM.
Yep, CP/M control program for microcomputers. That was the standard serious operating system for 8-bit machines back then. Having it in ROM meant it was instant on, no disk loading needed for the OS itself.
And the reviewer made that comment comparing it to the IBM PC.
Yeah, something like, if you've been brought up on the IBM PC, you don't know what you're missing. It was a bit of a dig, but also a nod to how efficient and powerful CP/M felt to people who knew it well.
What was better about CP/M than early MS-DOS in the eyes of a veteran user back then?
Well, CP/M was generally seen as leaner, more memory efficient. Early MS-DOS could be a bit clunky, used up more RAM just for the OS. CP/M gave you powerful command line tools and good file management in a small package. Perfect for a machine where memory was tight.
Speaking of tight memory, there was that slight limitation with the TPA, the transient program area.
Right. The TPA is the chunk of RAM left over for your application program to actually run in. On a standard CP/M machine, you'd expect maybe 64K. On the Dialtex-4, it was a bit less, 55.5K, available for applications.
Less if you use a RAM disk, too.
Exactly. If you carved out some RAM for that fast RAM disk, your available TPA shrank even further.
Why was it reduced? Where did that RAM go?
Almost certainly used by the system itself. For the extra routines needed to handle the fancy I/O, that virtual screen management, the power control features, stuff that wouldn't fit in the basic 32K OS ROM had to live in RAM.
Okay, but maybe not a huge problem if the main apps ran from ROM capsules.
That's the key. If you were using Talbot's Intex software from a ROM capsule, the application itself wasn't eating up that precious TPA space. So the limitation might not have been as bad as it sounds for the intended use case.
Right. Which brings us nicely to Intext. That was the core software package, wasn't it? The reason Talbot could charge so much.
Pretty much. Intext was their integrated suite. It combined text processing writing and communication sending, all designed to let you create copy quickly and file it electronically. It had a simple menu: edit, communicate, load, print.
The editor was okay for writing in the field, but the comm side was the main draw, connecting to services like Telecom Gold.
Yes, the standard comms option handled basic terminal emulation. You could dial into bulletin boards or commercial services like Telecom Gold, which was popular in the UK, and upload or download files. It even let you echo the whole session to the printer, which is handy for keeping records.
But Talbot had their own special sauce too, didn't they? The Dialtext protocol.
Ah, Dialtext, yes. That was their proprietary communications protocol. It used something called blocked transmission.
Blocked transmission. What's the significance of that?
You have to remember phone lines in 1985. They could be awful. Noisy, crackly connections dropping. Standard data transmission was really vulnerable to errors caused by line noise.
Okay, so blocked transmission helps how?
Instead of sending your file as one long, continuous stream of data, it breaks it into small, fixed-sized chunks or blocks. Each block gets sent with some error-checking codes attached.
Right.
The receiving system checks each block. If it's okay, it sends back an acknowledgement. Yep, got that one, send the next. If it detects an error because of noise on the line, it says, nope, that block was bad, send it again.
Ah, so it guarantees the data gets through intact, block by block, much more reliable.
Far more reliable and secure for sending important files like news stories or reports. It could handle noisy lines much better than standard methods.
Sounds great. But the catch.
The catch was huge: vendor lock-in. The reviewer stressed this. Dialtext only worked if the system on the other end was also a Talbot system running their software.
Ooh, right. So a journalist using Dialtext needed their news agency back home to have Talbot gear too.
Exactly. Clever business strategy for Talbot, wasn't it? Sell a reliable, proprietary solution that locks customers into your ecosystem, especially for big corporate deals.
Very clever. Okay, moving away from the core apps, the reviewer found a funny little quirk in the utilities program.
Yeah, the program for managing files and directories, it apparently had this helpful warning message: do not select a drive which is not connected.
Seems reasonable advice.
Of course, the reviewer immediately tried to select a non-existent drive.
Yeah.
Just to see what would happen. And the program didn't give a polite error message, it just completely crashed. Bombed out to the operating system, as the review put it.
Hey, a little lack of polish there, maybe.
Exactly. It's a nice little reminder that even on these expensive, specialized machines, early software could still have rough edges. You were still dealing with the pioneering days of computing.
But counteracting that little glitch, there was a truly brilliant feature for mobile writers: recover text.
Oh, this was fantastic, a real lifesaver. Imagine you accidentally switch the machine off, or the batteries just die suddenly before you've saved your work.
Nightmare scenario for a writer on deadline.
Totally. But the recover text option could often retrieve that unsaved text directly from the battery-backed RAM when you powered back up.
Wow.
For a professional user, where losing an hour's work could mean missing a critical deadline, that feature alone could be worth the price of the machine. It was insurance for your most valuable asset, the words you'd written.
So summing up the user experience, specialized, fast, secure, thanks to that ROM software and the clever screen handling. But now we have to face that price tag again.
Okay, we keep coming back to this. Base unit,
Yeah.
649 pounds in 1985, which we said is like 2,660 pounds today. But that just got you the computer and the built-in software. To actually use it as a mobile office, the costs piled up, didn't they?
Piled up is an understatement.
Right.
This is where you really see the true cost of professional portability back then. The accessories weren't just nice-to-haves. They were essential for getting real work done. Let's start with storage. That RAM disk was fast but small. You needed a way to save files long-term. You needed that external disk drive.
Right. The Epson PX-8 portable 3.5-inch drive cost an extra 360 pounds in 1985.
360 pounds, what's that today?
Okay, brace yourself. That 360-pound drive is the equivalent of roughly 475s in 2025.
1,500 pounds for a single battery-powered 3.5-inch floppy disk drive. Not even a hard drive.
Nope, floppy drive. That cost tells you just how much professionals valued reliable, non-volatile storage they could carry with them.
Astonishing. Okay, what if you needed to print something out? For a client, maybe.
You needed the printer, the Epson P40 microthermal printer. It was relatively cheaper at 95 pounds in 1985.
Cheaper, but still.
Still about 390 pounds in 2025 money. So add another 400 quid just for a tiny thermal printer. The total is climbing fast.
And you'd need something to carry all this expensive gear in. The case.
Yep. The specially designed carrying case was another 50 pounds. That's about 205 last today. An essential cost to protect your investment when you're traveling.
You wouldn't just toss nearly $5,000 worth of kit into any old bag.
Not likely. And then there were those extra modules for the bay if you wanted more RAM, or maybe another application on a ROM capsule.
How much were those?
An extra 64K RAM capsule or a specific application ROM was around 130 pounds each.
130 pounds.
Today, that's
It's about 530 pounds, 500 quid for a tiny plug-in memory cartridge. The cost per kilobyte was just eye-watering back then.
okay, let's add it up. The system the reviewer looked at, base unit, disk drive, printer, carrying case. What was the total 1985 price?
That configuration came to 11,154 pounds in 1985 pounds.
1,154 pounds. And the 2025 equivalent is?
An astonishing 4,730 pounds.
4,730 pounds. For a portable word processor and modem terminal in today's money.
Nearly $5,000, yeah. This wasn't just extensive, it was practically an institutional level purchase. Companies might buy these, maybe well-funded professionals, not your average user. Which brings us back to the justification. How did Talbot sell this? Especially when the core was a rebadged Epson, and you had things like the Tandy 100 out there for much less money.
It all came down to perceived reliability, the specialized software, and the sheer robustness of the build. Those are the things that matter most when your job depends on the gear working perfectly, maybe miles from anywhere.
Let's compare it to the Tandy 100 again. That was the iconic, portable, cheaper, everywhere.
And the Tandy 100 was brilliant for its price and time, but it was simpler. It usually ran its own basic built-in software, not full CPM usually. The apps were more rudimentary.
Yeah.
It often didn't have the same speed or the kind of I/O expansion the Dialtex-4 offered. Running proper CPM on the Dialtex meant access to a whole world of existing professional 8-bit software. Plus, those dual super-fast serial ports were a big advantage for comms.
And the build quality difference we talked about, that must have played a huge role.
Absolutely. It felt like serious equipment, not a consumer gadget. When you're spending the 1985 equivalent of nearly 5,000 pounds, you're buying peace of mind. You're paying for the better engineering that makes you confident it will survive the trip, survive the work environment.
So Talbot wasn't really trying to compete on price with a Tandy.
Not at all. They weren't going for volume sales. They were aiming to provide the best, most specialized, most reliable tool for very specific professional jobs. The high price was simply the cost of entry for that guaranteed utility.
It really drives home that if you wanted genuine, reliable, functional portability in 1985, there was just no cheap way to do it. High-quality components, specialized software, it all cost a fortune.
It was a necessary investment for professionals who needed that edge. The review basically concluded the same. The Dialtex-4 wasn't a budget machine. It was a specialist tool, priced for its niche, and the quality and features justified that focus on high-value vertical markets.
Wow. What an incredible look at the economics of early mobile computing. The premium you paid for making things small and functional was just immense. #tag outro. So the Talbot Dialtex-4, it was this robust, pretty fast, cleverly rebadged Epson PX-8. It really feels like a perfect snapshot of professional mobile computing needs in 1985.
Yeah, it was a technological shortcut, wasn't it? But one designed very specifically to solve problems. Text processing and secure fast communications away from the office.
The key takeaways seem pretty clear. First, that Epson-based engineering, refined by Talbot's software layer, gave it that HP-like build quality, essential for justifying the huge cost.
Absolutely. Second, usability won out over screen size. That little LCD was surprisingly readable, and the virtual screen system was pure genius. Made it compatible with CPM, made it practical for real work.
And finally, speed and security were the features you paid the premium for. That faster Z80, the very fast serial ports for quick data transfer, and that proprietary Dialtex protocol for reliable communication over bad phone lines.
It was a serious machine. An incredibly expensive step, yes, but a necessary one towards the idea of a true mobile workstation.
And that professional focus went right down to some of the deep engineering, didn't it? You wanted to circle back to that feature in the config program, the one using the internal clock.
Yeah, the clock calendar chip. You mentioned it let you set the auto power off time to save batteries.
Right.
But it could do more. You could actually set the Dialtex-4 to switch itself on at a specific time. It could display a message or even auto-run a specific application program all by itself.
Hang on, a battery-powered computer, off in a briefcase maybe, that could wake itself up on a timer. in 1985.
Exactly. Unattended automation. It was radically advanced thinking for the time.
That just opens up so many possibilities.
It really does, and it leaves a fascinating question for you, the listener, to think about. In that era, before reliable, always-on networks, what kind of critical, specialized job would need a machine to power itself on automatically like that?
What could it be doing?
Think about it. Was it programmed to dial a number at 3 a.m. automatically? Maybe to check a remote system for messages? Was it set to start logging data from some connected sensor at a specific time each day? Or maybe run a self-test before a field worker was scheduled to use it?
It makes it feel less like just a computer and more like an automated agent, doing a job silently without anyone needing to be there.
Precisely. The Talbot Dialtex-4 wasn't just a portable PC. It was one of the earliest hints, albeit a very expensive one, of the future of automated, scheduled remote tasks and communication.
A truly visionary piece of kit, despite the price.
An expensive signal, but visionary indeed.
Well, if you enjoyed this journey back to the high-cost, high-function world of 1985 professional tech, make sure you subscribe so you don't miss our next deep dive into the archives.
Until next time, keep questioning the price of progress, and may your battery-backed RAM always hold its charge.